welcome to Equip. My name is Josh Berg, and I'm joined today by Jim Braceland. Jim is the head of our Deaf Ministry here at Valley Forge Baptist Temple, and exciting to have you here, Jim. Thanks for coming.
Good to be here.
How many years have you been working with the deaf?
I started to learn sign language about 30 years ago, and when I say started to learn, I don't think you ever stop learning. But we started about 30 years ago in Deaf Ministry.
Awesome. Now, 30 years, I mean, that's an awesome time. So in that time frame, how did you learn? Like, what was your personal experience with learning to sign and working with the deaf?
Well, I didn't take the normal track for learning. Most people find a college that would teach the classes or find somebody that teaches in a church. In my setting, and I wouldn't highly recommend this to everyone, but in our setting, I wanted to memorize a gospel tract, so I got a sign language book and the gospel tract and just basically memorized word for word, or sign for word, I should say, all the way through that tract. And then I began to pray God would bring a deaf person to my life that needed to know how to get to heaven. And I got to lead a deaf person to Christ within the first year. And that started off a ministry for us of now being challenged to teach the Word of God to deaf. So I started to learn signs by actually fumbling and bumbling my way through a Bible lesson with the deaf and really being frustrated. Mm-hmm. That frustration led to a determination that I was going to learn these signs more effectively. And so over the years, our interpersonal relationships with deaf people have been where we have learned all of our signs from.
Wow, that's awesome. So it's a real, to use the term, hands-on experience in talking to these people and learning their language from them, and that's phenomenal. In regards to the ministry itself and a church wanting to start one, maybe they're considering, a pastor is considering this, what are some things that they should know and think about before even starting it?
Good question. It's always good to know if there are deaf in your area. Now, hearing people tend to say, oh, there's no deaf that live here. Deaf people don't have any visible signs of their handicap necessarily. They are not in a wheelchair. They're not using crutches. They don't need someone to lead them around. They look very normal, with maybe the exception of a hearing aid. But it's good to know if there are deaf in the area. There's usually a deaf or hard of hearing service, community service within your local area. It'd be good to go and see if you can find them, and then ask them how many deaf they know of that live in your area. But the one thing that really drives most deaf ministries that we find is that there's someone in the church who has either a deaf relative or just a burden for deaf people. Mm-hmm. And my feeling as being a pastor before was, if my folks have a burden for something, then I really look at that as something I should seriously consider as being from the Lord. And so if there's somebody in your church that says, well, I really got a passion for deaf people, that would cause me to really consider whether we should do it or not. Again, part of that is, do you have the people that will enable you to do that? If you're very limited, you may want to put it off a little bit and keep it in the back of your mind until you have more people to help. But those are the things I look for just to get started. So
cultivating that almost a burden, even
exactly.
As you started with the burden.
Exactly.
If someone sees that this may be a need, right
yes.
there, that's the open door to potentially starting this.
Exactly. If you just think it would be a neat thing to do, it will not work.
Yeah.
It will crash and burn. Deaf ministry can be very difficult. It's time-consuming. It's demanding. Once you start interpreting services, you have to interpret all the services that you offer, and it means that the folks who are involved in the interpreting process, they don't get to take a break very often. And so, being that it is demanding, if you just think it's a cool idea, maybe we should try it, it probably will not work. So the burden is one of the key things.
Right. Now, you and I have talked before a little bit about deaf culture, and it's a little different, as I understand. And you can't
yes.
just walk up to them and give them a gospel tract, like you would a hearing person.
Correct.
So how does that factor in to the ministry?
Yeah, that's a great point, Josh. There are a lot of pastors who think, well, I'll just, I'll print my sermons out and give those to deaf people, and that'll be sufficient for them. But the main thing that I want to get across with you today, as far as deaf culture is concerned, is for every hearing person that's born in America, English becomes our first language. Mm-hmm. If you know a bilingual family that perhaps they speak Spanish, the parents are Spanish descent, and that's their main language. Their children will learn English first, even in that process, but will become bilingual children. In the case of deaf people, they don't learn English first. They can't hear English. So the printed word and a printed track for a hearing person, we all may think, well, everybody can understand that track, but most deaf people would not be able to understand that track because there'll be enough terminology and enough sentence structure difference from sign language to the written English language that their culture is that visual world. Whereas hearing people, our culture is a verbal world. And we respond to stimulating words. They respond to stimulating concepts that they can see printed out for them. So deaf culture is a very real thing, and it's something we have to, if you're going to the mission field to deal with a different culture, you would learn all you could about that culture and try to, not that you could ever replicate it completely, but you try not to offend it. Right. You try to blend into it, and that's one of the really huge things about starting a really effective deaf ministry.
Awesome. Now let's kind of switch gears a little bit in the considerations of if a church has started, the financial side of it. Is there a lot of finances that may go into it? Is the ministry itself bring in finances? How does that work?
Well, if you find the right people to help you, the initial financial output is not very significant. Matter of fact, it's very minimal. You can get some good materials, you can get even good DVDs and things that are very minimally priced. Once the ministry starts, a lot of pastors will ask me, well, how good of the givers are the deaf? Well, typically they're not great givers. There's a couple of factors that work into that. Most of them are on Social Security. They don't necessarily have a real good paying job. Even if they do have a job, it's one that they've had to fit into with that language barrier, and so they don't always get the top pay. And a third thing is, the things we assume all people know because we've known them for so many years, deaf do not know. Most of them don't have any teaching on tithing. Of course, that comes within getting involved in a local church that teaches those things. However, if they've never had that, they don't really know that concept. And so they will not be your biggest givers. But to me, ministry's never been about what can someone give us. It's always about what we, from the Lord, can give to those we minister to.
Yeah, amen. So, kind of to recap here, kind of learning what the culture is. Sounds like it's a big thing. What is the deaf culture? Going to maybe community sites, doing some research about things in the area that the deaf are participating in. What kind of activity that is there to see if it really is a need in the area, and then finding a person, if there is a person that can really get the heart behind it to lead it.
Correct.
I think sounds like it's really important.
Yeah, there's no question. And I say this simplistically, almost anyone can learn sign language. It's like anything else. It's a skill that needs to be learned and developed. Not everybody can learn sign language, but many people can learn sign language. But it really is all about the heart. And if a person has a heart for deaf people, then their hands are going to follow. If their heart isn't there, they can have the hands, but the deaf will not respond because the heart's not there. It's like any other ministry in the church. If a person sings special music and they're doing it for the applause of men, we can feel that, we can sense that, and we're not blessed by that. Somebody can get up far less skilled in singing and maybe beat their way through a song and it not be the greatest musical thing that we've ever heard, but our hearts are touched because their heart was totally into it as a servant of the Lord. And I think the heart is huge in every ministry, but especially in this ministry.
Because they can sense it.
They can feel it. They can see it.
Yeah.
Deaf people have a way of looking past your face, past your hands, and into your heart. I don't know how they do it, but I love that because if your heart is really tender for them, they will respond very quickly. When I first started in deaf ministry, my signs were horrible, but the deaf kept coming, and one day I finally asked them, after a few months, I said, I'm really horrible in this. Why are you still coming? And they looked at me and they said, well, you love us. And because you love us, we'll stay with you. Wow. And so they literally taught me the language.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's a blessing.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for explaining your heart behind it and some wonderful thoughts if you're considering what a deaf ministry may be in your church, and if you should start one. Definitely some things to consider, and we thank you, Brother Brayson, for being here with us.
You're welcome. My privilege.
If you'd like to find out more, you can always contact the church. We'd be happy to help if you'd like to speak with Brother Jim about some of this, if you are strongly considering this, to find out more information and get some ideas. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Thank you.